The wind blew dry dust across the cracked main road of El Dorado Springs, a once proud mining town, now rotting under the weight of silence and corruption. The wooden sign at the entrance still read, "Population 2041." But everyone knew the soul of the town had died long ago. Dear listeners, before we move forward, please subscribe my channel to hit 1,000 figure. It wasn't always like this. Once, El Dorado was the kind of place where kids rode bikes till sunset and folks left their doors unlocked. But after the silver mines shut down and the big city tycoons moved in, everything changed. What remained was a town run by money, not justice. Sheriff Thompson, the man in uniform now, wasn't a sheriff in the real sense. More like a puppet. He wore the badge, carried the gun, but answered to Mayor Briggs, the wealthiest man in the county. People whispered about drug shipments moving through the freight yard at night, about missing girls no one ever looked for, and about land seizures happening without notice. No one said anything out loud. Because in El Dorado, silence kept you alive. That's when a dusty Ford pickup truck rolled into town, just as the sun hit the ridge. Behind the wheel sat a man nobody had seen in nearly a decade, hat low, jaw clenched, and eyes sharper than ever, Clint Eastwood. He parked in front of the old sheriff's office, which now served as a storage room for campaign signs. His boots hit the gravel with that slow, deliberate rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. People across the street peeked out of shop windows. A few older folks whispered his name like a ghost from the past. It can't be. That's... Sheriff Wade Clint Eastwood had once been the law in El Dorado Springs. Firm but fair, respected and feared. But politics pushed him out. They said he was too old-fashioned, too rough, too honest for the new era. So he disappeared into the mountains. Until now. He stepped inside the sheriff's office, looked around at the empty desks, and muttered in his slow, gravel-filled voice, "Town smells like rot, and I haven't even lit a cigar yet." Behind him, the door creaked. A teenage boy with fear in his eyes walked in, holding a torn flyer in his hand, a missing girl. He looked up at Clint and said, almost whispering, "They said she ran away. But I know she didn't. My sister wouldn't do that." Clint took the flyer, glanced at it, and then back at the boy. He didn't ask more questions, didn't need to. The badge may not have been on his chest anymore, but justice. Justice was still in his blood. "What's your name, son?" "Eli." Clint gave a slow nod. "All right, Eli, let's find your sister." And just like that, the law had returned to El Dorado Springs. Night fell like a thick blanket over El Dorado Springs, but the darkness was more than just the absence of light. It was a presence. In the shadows of the courthouse steps and the rusting train yard fences, secrets walked free, while justice remained buried. Clint Eastwood stood silently outside the diner, sipping bitter black coffee from a chipped mug, his eyes fixed on the town's heartless rhythm. Eli sat across from him, nervous hands twisting the hem of his hoodie. The boy's voice trembled as he told Clint everything, how his sister, Amber, vanished after she refused to join a private party hosted at Mayor Briggs's mansion, how the sheriff shrugged it off, saying, "Girls her age get bored and disappear all the time." But Eli knew. He had seen her that night, crying, being forced into a black Escalade by two men in deputy uniforms. Clint didn't interrupt. He just listened, every word chiseling deeper into his quiet fury. When the boy was done, Clint slowly set the mug down and looked out the diner window. His reflection stared back, older and worn, but unbroken. The law had turned into a business here, run by men who thought justice was for sale. But Clint, he never believed in selling anything that sacred. He walked into the sheriff's office the next morning, not with a badge, not with permission, but with purpose. Sheriff Thompson was there, leaned back in his chair with his boots on the desk, flipping through a local paper. He didn't even look up when Clint entered. "I heard you crawled back into town, Wade," he said, voice smug and lazy. "What's the matter? Miss the dust?" Clint's reply was ice cold and razor sharp. "I miss the time when cowards didn't wear badges." The room tensed. Thompson slowly stood, trying to puff himself up. But standing next to Clint Eastwood was like a kid shadowboxing next to a mountain. He tried to assert control, tried to remind Clint that this wasn't his town anymore. Clint didn't flinch. "I'm looking into the Amber Davis case," Clint said plainly, ignoring the sheriff's weak attempt at posturing. "You can either help or get out of the damn way." Thompson laughed, a hollow sound. "That case is closed. She ran off. Happens all the time." Clint leaned in slightly, his voice low and menacing. "She didn't run. You just didn't chase." The sheriff's smirk faltered for a second, but arrogance quickly returned. "You don't have jurisdiction here." Clint stepped back, turned to leave, and spoke without looking. "Good. That means I don't need permission to start kicking doors in." That night, Clint revisited his old cabin outside town, the place where memories of a better El Dorado lived, buried under time and dust. He opened a locked trunk at the foot of the bed, pulling out a weathered leather holster and an old six-shooter that still gleamed like it remembered justice. He buckled the belt tight around his waist, his face lit only by the glow of a single oil lamp. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about pride. It was about a girl who vanished, a town that turned its back, and a man who never learned how to walk away from what was right. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills like distant war drums. Trouble was coming. But this time, it wasn't trouble that rode into town. It was justice. The next morning, the town woke to an uneasy stillness. It wasn't fear in the air yet, not quite, but something unfamiliar, something ancient. Word had spread that Clint Eastwood, Sheriff Wade, as the old-timers still called him, was asking questions, the kind of questions no one dared to ask anymore, and not the kind you could ignore. Clint started with the freight yard. The place looked abandoned, but at night, trucks rolled in and out with no license plates and blacked-out windows. He stood by the old water tower, watching through binoculars. Two goons in security jackets were loading heavy crates from a train car into an unmarked van. He didn't need to see what was inside. The way they moved, fast, careful, nervous, told him everything. Something illegal, something dangerous. Clint stepped out into the open, his silhouette long and unmistakable under the rising sun. He didn't shout, didn't need to. The guards froze the moment they saw him, their hands drifting toward their belts. Clint's hand rested on his hip, still, relaxed, and yet carrying a weight that made both men hesitate. One of them tried to speak, some tough guy line about private property. But before he got the second word out, Clint was already walking. "If it's private, maybe you should stop using public trains," Clint said flatly, stopping just a few feet away. The taller guard puffed up. "You got a warrant, cowboy?" Clint tilted his head slightly and narrowed his eyes. "Nope. Got something better." He flipped open an old photo. Amber Davis, smiling, innocent, missing. Then he raised a single brow. "You seen her?" The guard hesitated. Just long enough. Clint's right hook came like lightning, pure, practiced, and brutal. The man crumpled to the gravel like a dropped sack of meat. The other reached for his gun, but Clint's boot met his knee before the holster even clicked. 2 men down, no shots fired. Inside the train car, he found what he feared. Black duffel bags packed with cash, vials, and something worse, photos. Of girls. Young girls. Some looked barely 15. Amber was among them. That night, Clint handed the photos to Eli in a sealed envelope. She didn't just run, kid. She was taken. Eli's eyes welled with tears, but his jaw tightened. He didn't break. Clint nodded, quietly proud of the boy's grit. I need you to go stay with someone out of town, somewhere safe. This is going to get worse before it gets better. What about you? Clint didn't answer. He just lit a match, touched it to a cigar, and stared into the flame. I'm going to find the rest of them, and when I do, hell's coming with me. Across town, Mayor Briggs received a phone call from a man in a crisp suit. He's back, the voice said. He's digging. Briggs didn't look surprised, just annoyed. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and muttered, "Then let's bury him." Again. But this time, they weren't dealing with a man who could be bribed, bought, or broken. Clint Eastwood had nothing to lose, and justice was the only thing he came to collect. The Briggs estate sat like a castle at the edge of El Dorado Springs, a mansion built from blood money, intimidation, and silence. Wide marble steps led to tall doors, guarded by men who didn't wear uniforms, but everyone in town knew they were the real muscle. Expensive SUVs lined the circular driveway, their tinted windows hiding secrets no courtroom had ever seen. Inside, under crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes, Mayor Briggs hosted his usual crowd of politicians, fixers, and city elites. They laughed over cigars and brandy, insulated from the pain they'd caused outside those gates. But not tonight. Clint Eastwood stood at the base of that driveway, the brim of his hat low, his long coat fluttering slightly in the wind. In one hand, he held the missing girl's photos. In the other, his Colt revolver, loaded, oiled, ready. He didn't walk up the driveway. He marched. 2 guards moved to stop him, cocky and well-fed, thinking he was just an old man with a chip on his shoulder. The first one reached for his weapon, but didn't even get the chance to draw. Clint's gun was out and aimed faster than a heartbeat. "Go home," Clint growled, "while you still can." One of them froze. The other, younger and dumber, tried to play tough. "You don't have jurisdiction here, old man." Clint took a slow step forward, eyes hard as stone. "Number, but justice doesn't need permission." The gun never wavered. The second man flinched and backed away. Both guards stepped aside. Clint walked past them like a storm heading into the eye. Inside, Briggs was in the middle of a toast when the heavy doors burst open. Glasses clinked. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. And there he was, Clint Eastwood, a shadow from the past, walking across marble floors with spurs clicking and a face carved from justice itself. Briggs chuckled nervously. "Well, well, the cowboy returns. What is it this time, Wade? Ghost stories? More accusations?" Clint tossed the folder onto a nearby table. The photos spilled out, faces of missing girls, bruised and terrified. Gasps filled the room. One of the guests stood abruptly, knocking over a chair. "You did this," Clint said, pointing a finger straight at Briggs, "and I'm here to end it." Briggs tried to laugh it off, but panic crept into his voice. "You have no proof. These are just photos. You can't pin anything on me." Clint took a step forward, then another. "You're right. I can't." He pulled out a voice recorder and pressed play. Amber's voice crackled through the speakers, weak but clear. "Mayor Briggs said if I told anyone, I'd disappear like the others. But if this recording makes it out, tell my brother. I didn't run. The room fell silent. All color drained from Briggs's face. He reached for something under the table, maybe a gun, maybe a panic button. But Clint was faster. The Colt barked once, boom! And the room screamed as the mayor's pistol spun from his hand, skidding across the floor. Clint didn't shoot to kill. He didn't need to. Briggs fell back, clutching his bleeding hand and screaming like the coward he was. "That's for Amber," Clint growled. The guests fled. Some called the state police. Others just ran, ashamed, exposed, terrified. As Clint walked out of that house of rot, sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time in years, El Dorado Springs was about to see real lawmen enter the town. He didn't stop walking. He didn't wait for applause. By the time the state troopers arrived, the town had already started to shift. News vans parked outside Briggs's mansion, their cameras capturing the downfall of a man once untouchable. The mayor was in cuffs, his hand bandaged, head down. One by one, names started spilling. Deputies, businessmen, city council members, all dragged into the daylight like rats from a sinking ship. But Clint Eastwood wasn't there to celebrate. He stood alone on the ridge just outside El Dorado Springs, the early morning sun painting the hills in gold, the same hills he rode through as a younger man. His long coat rippled in the breeze, the brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. He lit a match with his thumb and struck it against the heel of his boot, letting the flame touch the end of his cigar. The smoke curled into the air like a final signature. Behind him, Eli stepped forward, holding a paper in his hand. "They want to make you sheriff again," he said. "Whole town voted on it this morning." Clint didn't turn around. He just kept looking at the town below. "They don't need me anymore," he said quietly. "They need to remember how to stand on their own." Eli looked down, gripping the paper tightly. "What about justice?" Clint finally turned, eyes sharp but soft around the edges. "Justice isn't a badge. It's a choice. You make it every day, with your hands, your voice, or your silence." He reached out and placed a weathered silver star in Eli's palm, his old badge. "You remember what happened here. You remember her. That's how we win." Eli nodded, tears in his eyes but a fire in his chest. He had seen evil, but he had also seen the kind of man who fights it, not for glory, not for praise, but because it's right. Clint turned, walking to his old pickup truck, its tires caked in red dust. He opened the door, took one last look at the town, and gave a small nod. Not to anyone, just to the land, the sky, the justice he left behind. The engine rumbled to life, low and steady like thunder in the distance, and just like that, he was gone. Back in town, the new sheriff's office reopened. The mayor's mansion was turned into a shelter for missing children. And every year, folks gathered under the courthouse steps to tell the story of the man who came back when they needed him most. They never saw him again, but they always left the sheriff's chair empty, just in case.